Hi, it's Dennis Daly. When I was doing interviews, I interviewed a lot of people who had just written a book. That was easy because all the book agents hounded people such as myself to get their client on the air. David Bach had written a book about money. I knew I had to talk to him because I didn't have any. David, thanks for taking the time to join us. You've written a wonderful new book called Smart Women Finish Rich. We've got a lot to talk about on the show, including retirement plans and mistakes people make and how we can spend too much money eating at restaurants and all those other kinds of things where we nickel-dime ourselves to death. You have come down to L.A. from San Francisco. Before we talk about the book and saving money, tell me a little bit about your background. How did you first... and I understand from a conversation we had before going on the air, it was when you were a child. How did you first get interested in investments?
I grew up as a strange child because at the age of 7, I was very close with my grandmother, all through my life, actually. My grandmother, unfortunately, recently passed away a year ago, but my grandmother was a very, very unique woman in the fact that she was an investor 50 years ago when a lot of women were not investors back then. And one day, at the age of 7, I was at McDonald's with her, and it was my favorite restaurant in the whole world, and she looked at me and she said, "You know, David, instead of being somebody that comes here and spends money, you could actually own this place and make money." And I was 7 years old, and I looked at grandmother and I said to her, "Well, what do you mean I could own McDonald's? I'd have to be a millionaire." And she said, "No, it's not true." And she proceeded at lunchtime to take out the newspaper while I was eating my Big Mac and French fries and show me that McDonald's was a publicly traded stock, opened up the business section, and then she showed me what it was trading for. I think it was like $15 at the time. And she said, "You know, David, if we stopped coming here every week for about 3 months and you saved that money that we normally spend here," she said, "you could buy a share of stock in McDonald's and be an owner." And I got all excited. I mean, I went back home. I told my parents that I was going to own McDonald's. I told all my friends at school I was going to own McDonald's. And about 90 days later, that's exactly what I did. My grandmother helped me buy my first share of stock. And it changed my whole life because from then on, not only was I excited that I owned McDonald's, but everywhere I went, I wanted to know if I could be an owner. You know, like a year later, we went to Disneyland, and the first thing I said to my parents was, "Well, can we buy Disneyland?" You know, and a lot of parents take their kids to Disneyland, but not many parents are teaching their kids how to own Disneyland.
Sure.
And the second stock I bought was Disneyland. So I've been investing ever since. My family's been in the investment business for years. My father's been a financial advisor for 35 years. And I got into business in 1993. And since then, I've helped thousands of people learn how to get smart about money by teaching investment classes. And I manage about $600 million right now for individual investors.
I keep using the excuse for why I'm not in the market. The fact that my dad loathed the stock market. I don't want to get too heavily into this, but I just wonder how many people grew up getting from their parents that work ethic that was driven by the Depression, where my dad thought if you didn't get your hands dirty, it wasn't legitimate work. He would cheer when the stock market went down. I mean, he would just laugh at all these people who were losing their money. Do some people, obviously I still feel that way, but do some people still shy away from the market for odd reasons?
Well, I mean, more people are investing today than ever before. And one of the things I always say that in my seminars is this. At age 30, we're thinking about retirement planning. At age 40, we're starting to worry about it. And at age 50, we start to hyperventilate. And at age 50 right now, we've got somebody in this country every 7 seconds is turning 50. And there are a lot of people who are 50 right now that have done no planning. And so they're in a position where they have to play catch up. And as a result, we have more money going in the stock market than ever before because while many people were raised with this depression concept of, hey, it's got to be safe, it's got to be in a bank, it's got to be secure, it's got to be guaranteed. The reality is right now, if you own a guaranteed investment like a certificate of deposit, you're earning 4% and it's taxable. And so after taxes, you're really only earning 2%. And that means after inflation, you're going backwards every single year, which is basically called going broke safely. So you have to invest some money in the stock market if you want to have enough money to live with for the rest of your life. Well, let's just use 2 recent internet stocks, Amazon.com and Yahoo, which everybody knows those 2 stocks right now. Had you put $10,000 into Amazon.com last January, and had you put $10,000 into Yahoo, so $20,000 total, you'd have about $1.2 million from a $20,000 investment. Now, that is truly extraordinary, and that is truly the exception to the rule. But what's so exciting about the stock market is that you don't have to find the Amazon.coms of the world. Hey, if you bought Microsoft 10 years after it came out, you've still made 10 times your money. I mean, there's so many companies out there. We were talking before this, how I've missed some of these good companies, how personally I started buying Dell computers. In 1993, I think I bought my first Dell computer. Well, had I put $10,000 into Dell back in 1993, I think today I'd have around $500,000-$600,000 in Dell stock. So, the key is this. You don't have to find these crazy, secret, you don't have to look under rocks. Look at what you do every day. Most people actually have Microsoft software. Most people use AOL. You buy your gas somewhere, whether it's Chevron or Exxon. The whole message behind becoming wealthy in America, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, how you pay yourself first, and then invest in what you know. It doesn't have to be complicated.
I don't know why I thought about this, and if the answer is negative here, I'll feel very un-American. But we still hear these public service announcements to buy savings bonds.
Oh.
I can tell by the look on your face, how bad is the return on a typical savings bond? And pardon me, Uncle Sam, for asking this.
It doesn't get much worse. I mean, I think the returns on savings bonds are less than 4%. It's truly an absurd place to put your money.
So in that case, you're going broke patriotically.
You're going, exactly. I mean, and that's just a silly place to put your long-term money. Long-term money, meaning anything that you're going to have your money put away for more than 5 years, you really should be considering the stock market. And hey, if you don't want to go out and buy individual stocks, you don't have to today. You can buy a mutual fund. And if there's 12,000 mutual funds right now, so if you don't want to do the research, I can make it very simple for you.
Have there always been mutual funds, or are they a recent invention?
It's a great question. Interestingly enough, we have had mutual funds for almost 60 years. But 60 years ago, mutual funds were not popular because they were very expensive. They cost an average of 10% to buy because there was this huge commission.
Can we define what a mutual fund is? Very
simply. A mutual fund is basically a pool of money where you'll have a money manager, and people will put the money into this fund, and then the mutual fund manager's job is to buy and sell stocks. And it's basically a pool of investments with stocks or bonds, depending what's inside that mutual fund, that individual investors can invest in. But I started saying a simple mutual fund to start with is an index fund. And what an index fund is, an index fund simply owns 500 stocks that are made up of the Standard & Poor's 500. And so it's basically like owning the stock market. You own a index of the stock market.
So as healthy as the total stock market is that's where your investments
fund's going to do. If the stock market's going up,
so you might call it a generic.
It's exactly what it is. It is a generic fund. It is actually becoming the largest funds in the world because people are wanting to invest in what's easy. And the good news is that this generic type of fund, as you talk about, it's a perfect way to describe it, generic mutual fund, has outperformed 90 to 95% of all mutual funds out there anyway.
I think there's one proof here that more and more people are getting into investing, and that old, albeit artificial resentment is leaving, is that if you listen to conservative Christian commentators, if you watch Pat Robertson, if you look at what the slightly to the right mainstream Protestant sects are doing, you see that the whole idea of the poor will always be with us is being forgotten, and that there's this wonderful rationale for the accumulation of wealth now. It's an interesting turnabout in many ways in that aspect of our society.
Well, you asked me earlier what my message is. In my book, Smart Women Finish Rich, my message is basically this. It's very easy in America to be rich. The problem is we're not taught how to be smart about money. And so what I tell people is this. You've heard the old statement that the rich get richer and the poor get poor. Mm-hmm. It's not really the case. The truth is that the knowledgeable get wealthier and the ignorant stay poor. And I don't mean that people are ignorant. I mean that people are literally ignorant about money.
Classic ignorance.
Classic ignorance, where they don't know anything, where they don't understand why they should be using a retirement account, or where they're consistently spending more money than they make. And, today in America, they say for everybody who's age 50, if you put two people in a room that are both 50, one of them has less than $10,000 saved.
David, you are a guy who has feathered his nest, if you will. You've done well in the stock market. You have your finger on millions and millions of dollars of money that you're managing for people. You've written this new book. When you see people, well, such as myself, who still at my age are living paycheck to paycheck, that really in a way must kind of terrify you.
Well, I don't think it so much terrifies me as it gets me excited, because I really know that the only thing that's separating you between where you are now and where you need to be is truly reading my book and taking 2 or 3 hours to get smart about money, and then taking some simple steps. I mean, we talked about today at lunch, I want you to sign up for your 401k plan. Mm-hmm. Now, that's a simple step. I want the listeners that are listening right now, if you are listening to us talk, I want you to ask yourself a question. And that question is, are you paying yourself first? And what I mean by that is, are you taking a piece of your paycheck, it should be at least 10%, and putting that money into what's known as a pre-tax retirement account? Now, the government wants us to be wealthy. That's why they set up provisions in the tax code that allow for a 401k plan, like this company here has, mm-hmm. or a SEP IRA if you're self-employed, or a deductible IRA if you don't have a 401k plan. The problem in America is that people aren't using these plans, and they're not paying themselves first. The savings rate last year, I don't know, do you know what the savings rate was last year? Did you hear this?
No.
How about less than 1%?
You mean if you take the whole accumulation of Americans, the amount of money they set aside
was less than 1% of what they earned.
Of the whole income.
Yeah, isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
Now,
what is it in other countries like Japan? Do you know offhand?
Japan, let's just compare our two economies for a second. Our economy is booming. It's probably better than it's ever been, mm-hmm. ever. And we have a savings rate of less than 1%. Japan has been in a 10-year recession, which is horrible. Horrible. And they say the savings rate last year in Japan was 17%. So what my message, and we talked about this earlier, is look, if you make $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year right now, chances are you're living paycheck to paycheck. But when you look at your lifetime earnings, the reality is that you will earn between $1 and $3 million during your lifetime. The sad thing is that while you may earn $3 million in your lifetime, the average American still will have nothing to show for it at 65. Now, that can be changed very quickly by paying yourself first, by signing up for your 401k plan, by maximizing the contributions. And what do I mean by that? People who use their plans at work, they usually sign up and they go, well, I can't put the most away. I can't put 10% away. I'll put away 5%. And later on, I'll put more in. And they never get around to putting more in. So, you want to do this is you want to go back to your employer, your benefits person, and ask the question, are you putting the maximum amount of contributions into your plan that you can? Now, I go through all this in my book in detail, and it sounds a little bit complicated, but it really isn't. The biggest message I can leave here today is if you save $10 a day, which is not that much money.
Give up cigarettes for some people.
Do you realize a pack of cigarettes in California, we're talking $4 a day habit?
Yeah, should be $80, but that's another story.
Let's just say you save $10 a day. You cut out, I have a chapter in my book I call the Latte Factor. And the Latte Factor came about as a result of me going out and doing seminars and saying, look, you only have to save $10 a day. If you save $10 a day, that's almost $4,000 a year. Mm-hmm. Now, if you put $4,000 a year away in a retirement account, and you do that for 25 years, and you get a rate of 12%, which is what the stock market has averaged for 50 years, you're going to have $1 million in 25 years. That's true. It's absolutely true. Now, I've had people say to me, well, I had this woman say one day at a seminar, David, great idea, but I'm 23 years old, I'm living paycheck to paycheck, I'm making $30,000 a year, and I don't have $10 a day to put away. And I looked at Kim, and I said, I have a hard time believing that. I said, but, let's take the challenge. Take me through your typical day. I said, in the morning, do you have any coffee? She said, yes. I go, you have free coffee in the office, or do you buy your coffee? She said, well, I stop at Starbucks. I go, oh, do you get a regular coffee or a latte? Well, I get a double non-fat cappuccino. What does that cost, Kim? Well, $2.95. Anything with the cappuccino that costs $2.95? Well, yeah, I get a bagel.
$3.50, $4.50,
So now we're at $4.50. She leaves a tip in the tip jar. Kim has spent $5 and she hasn't got to work yet. Now at 10:30 she goes on a break and she goes downstairs to Jamba Juice, which is a juice place. It's a franchise in a lot of places in America. And she gets a glass of juice, orange juice, and a Power Bar, which is a snack. And she spends another $6. Now, Kim is spending $11 a day on snacks.
And it isn't even lunch yet.
It's not even lunch yet. Now, I said, Kim, look, I don't want you to starve to death, okay? I'm not going to take away breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I just want to take away the latte habit, the snack habit. I want you to, buy a big old pot of coffee and bring it to work, or drink the free coffee, or drink water. Moral of the story is this: we've all got the Latte Factor. Now, how do you find your own Latte Factor? Because I know there are people who are listening to this all over America. Not everybody's into lattes. We're out here in a major city. For 7 days, take my 7-day financial challenge, which is the following. Take a 50-cent pad of paper and write down every single dollar you spent. Like you and I were talking today about how much you think you spend on food. Just write everything down. The key to this exercise is you can't cheat. You can't change your spending habits for the next 7 days. So you just got to do what you always normally do, and all I want you to do is track it, every single dime you spend. At the end of 7 days, I want you to look at your own spending habits and figure out what you can cut out. Because if you can get yourself to save $10 a day and put that in a retirement account, you can be a millionaire and not be one of these Americans that has to live paycheck to paycheck and in fear of being broke.
The way we spend, you're absolutely right, becomes so invisible to us. It's like the diet people who say, sit down and write down everything that you eat for a week. And if you really do that assiduously, you start saying, good God, I ate that much yesterday? And it's the same way. We nickel-dime ourselves to death without knowing it. And you and I, when we were having lunch, I was very honest about my financial problems, and I was mentioning to you that I have just got to bite the bullet and brown bag it all the time. I live across the street from 3 restaurants.
Right.
This may be too complicated a question to answer here, but is there much of a difference between the secondary expenses, such as restaurant, of a single person with one income than a married couple or 2 people living together who share their income? Because I tend to think that there's more of a propensity to fix meals if you're with somebody, particularly if it's husband and wife. You may be in a larger place with a nicer kitchen, and you have 2 incomes, but the thought was occurring to me when you were talking, having 2 incomes in a married situation sometimes means you have children, which single people don't. Right. So maybe married people with 2 incomes really aren't in any better shape, if they do have 2 incomes, than a single person with 1.
Well, it's interesting because really I look at your situation and I think to myself, your situation is perfect because you have no children, you have no alimony, you don't have any of the things that drag people down. All you have to take care of is you. And, I have a lot of people that come to my office now because people get married later and later. And if you don't have children and you don't have dependents, becoming wealthy is easy because you don't have anybody else to have to worry about. So I really think that you're almost at it, you personally, and those people who are listening who don't have children or aren't married, I think you're actually you have an advantage in many cases as far as becoming wealthy.
Or maybe whose children are now out of the nest, but they're still young.
One of the things I want to share, because you said something to me today that was so amazing, which was...
I thought you were going to say it was so pathetic.
No, you're very honest with me today at lunch, and you said that you think you spend $25 a day on food.
Some days, yeah.
And the interesting thing is that we think we're spending $25, but what I try to point out to people is it took $50 worth of income to get $25 worth of spendable cash. Now think about that for a second. For some people, that means that they had to work 4 hours to get that $25.
Yeah.
And when you start looking at your income that way, in other words, when you look at what you spend and you remind yourself that you didn't actually earn $1, you had to earn $2 to get $1 because I'm talking about taxes here.
Sure.
Then you start asking yourself, well, how many hours did I have to work to earn that money? And in other words, is my 2 fast food meals a day worth 4 hours of my time?
When Richard Simmons invented Deal-A-Meal, he took the diabetic substitution diet and basically put it on playing cards. So you get X number of these and X number of those. It occurs to me that it might be fun to go to a toy store someplace and get a huge amount of play money. Figure out how much you take home over your 2 weeks. Divide that by 14. Put 1/14 of that in money. And then every morning when you come to work, you get an envelope. And that's your pay for that day. It would really, put that in your seminar, it would really drive home to a person the exchange they're getting for that day's work. Or when you leave at night, pull out that envelope, and then on Friday you get 3 of them for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But I really think, from what you said, that if we could touch and feel,
Right.
if we were day laborers, for example, where we're paid at the end of the day, we'd have a much better understanding of what that work was worth.
Well, you said something to me which made me really think today also, which was talking about the Depression era. And why is it that the baby boom generation is so different than the Depression era as far as money goes? Mm-hmm. And I think the answer is that the Depression era didn't really have credit cards. They spent cash.
Yeah.
And today, we're raised with credit cards. You know, when I went to USC down the street here, and at USC, when I walked into the dorms the first day at age 18, I don't even have a job yet, but I have a student ID, there were 3 credit card companies waiting to meet me at the door. And one credit card company gave you a clock, and the other credit card company gave you a gym bag, and the other credit card company gave you a t-shirt. And you walked in the dorms, and all you had to do is show them your student ID and sign a form. It took like 2 seconds. And you walked away within an hour with $3,000 worth of credit cards. Now you're 18, you don't know the first thing about money, and you go out and you have $3,000 and you spend it like it's play money, which is exactly what I did. I mean, I talk about my book that I had a black belt in shopping in college. I was a black belt shopper, and my spending was out of control in college. And it wasn't until the end of college that I recognized that what I was doing was terrible. That, in other words, spending more money than I had to spend was a problem.
Sure.
And the way I changed my habits was I paid off my credit cards. I cut up those cards. Today I use like an American Express card or a debit card. And I've gone back to the cash system.
Sure.
And one of the things I talk about in my book is that give yourself a spending limit. What I did to get myself to stop shopping, because I used to shop all the time. I'd go to like the Galleria or the Beverly Hills Center and you go to these huge shopping malls and you just hang out all day and shop. What I did to get myself to stop shopping was I basically gave myself a $100 spending limit. And the limit was this: I could not spend $100 without taking 48 hours to think about it. So in other words, if I went to a store...
No impulse buying.
No impulse buying, exactly.
Yep.
It wipes out the impulse buying, because if I see something that costs more than $100... and I hadn't planned to go there to buy it, I got to go home for 48 hours, cool down, and ask myself, do I really need it, and then drive back to the store. Well, that absolutely eliminates shopping. Because
Sure.
what happened for me was within a period of probably 4 or 5 months, shopping was no longer fun. It's no longer fun to go to a shopping mall if you don't spend money. Mm-hmm. And so I stopped.
It's recreation.
Yeah, and now I hate shopping. I absolutely abhor going shopping. My wife says to me at the end of the year, she's like, you gotta go buy new underwear. You know, or you gotta go get some new shirts. Your shirts are falling apart. And, 10 years ago, I used to shop all the time, so I know it's changeable.
David, I have a story I like to tell about a wonderful phrase I learned. When I was a kid growing up in rural Indiana, there was a man in my hometown named Brooks Allen. When I was a kid growing up in rural Indiana, there was a man in my hometown named Brooks Allen. And Brooks was a retiree who had moved back to the city, and he did a little radio show called The Old Timer, in which basically he found what had happened 100 years ago that week, or 25 years ago that week. And he was the third generation of the family that owned the building and loan in my hometown, kind of like George Bailey's family. And I remember as a senior in college, I had to do, as an assignment, a radio interview with someone in finance. So I'm home one weekend, and I knew Brooks, and we sat down. I still have the tape, and I sound so funny at age 20. But he said something to me that I think should be emblazoned on every credit card sent out. It's a short little phrase that he didn't make up, that I've never lived by. He looked at me and he said, "You know, instant credit is instant debt." Instant credit is instant debt. And boy, actually, instant credit is instant smile. It's instant everything else. But I wish I had lived by those words, because he was so prophetic when he said that.
No, that's really true.
But, when I went through, Donald Trump and I have both gone through bankruptcy, so I don't feel bad talking about this. But I was laid off for 10 months. It was the year of the Gulf War, or whenever, 91, 90, and ended up going through bankruptcy. I was meeting my credit card payments just fine until the income stopped. And I remember at the time, after the bankruptcy was finalized, I got 4 letters from companies offering me credit cards.
Isn't that incredible?
Because the rationale was I couldn't walk out on them. I couldn't declare bankruptcy immediately again. and I threw the applications away.
Well, I tell, especially the women that are listening, the credit card companies now want you to become their customer because they know that women are taking over the world as far as finances go. And they're making it easier and easier for women to get credit cards. And I'm trying as hard as I can to persuade women, don't sign up for these credit cards. Don't get involved in what I call credit card roulette, where you are literally just getting all these credit cards and then you're moving them from card to card to get lower interest. Get off the credit card spiral. I think it's so important for women to take charge of their financial future. And I don't mean just taking charge of your spending, but knowing where the investments are in your life and in your family's life. And I have a quiz on my website, which is finishrich.com, which you can go to this website, and I have a quiz, and it's in the book too, which is basically, do you know where the money is? And you can take this quick quiz, and it will tell you what you know about money or don't know about money that you should know. And it's in my book too. It's in the first chapter. But it's very important to take a quiz like this and get a grasp of how much you know about money or don't know about money. And the other thing I've done on my website is I've provided the first chapter of my book for free. So you can go on my website right now.
Neat.
Yeah, finishrich.com. You can print up the first chapter, and you can literally print it up and read the chapter and give it out to your friends too. I mean, I want as many people to get smart about money as possible.
I need to tell you something quickly here, and this is really putting my heart on my sleeve here. I got a secured credit card last year. Now, I don't particularly like secured credit cards, but I wanted to kind of rebuild my credit, and I figured what I'm really doing is I'm giving a bank my money and letting them lend it back to me at high interest. But I got over limit because I was late, and the late fee drove me over limit. I have sent this bank in Virginia $750 this past year and still am over limit. Because the over-limit fees and the late fees, and then they charged me my re-registration fee, which then drove it over limit again and generated an over-limit fee. And then they didn't give me the right information about when it was due. I basically bought lunch for those people several hundred times and still am over my credit limit. I mean, I feel like flying to Richmond, Virginia and walking in and saying, do you know the meaning of the word usury? Yeah. I mean, it's just absolutely... And the point I want to make here is that I may speak well, I may have a grasp of the language and be able to ad-lib for hours with the lights out with no script, but I can't meet my bills. I am almost autistic, or phobic would be a better word, when it comes to paying bills. I have late fees generated because I'm too chicken to open the bill, and then I found out it should have been paid last week. So on top of my other problems I have, I'm one of those people who just doesn't do well with numbers. And when you said get rid of your credit cards, boy, I tell you, I think with debit cards, which if people don't have one, it sits across your checking account,
right,
and you can't borrow against it, and there's no...
You're just spending your own money.
Spending your own money. It's like writing a check. Some places call them check cards. And with the presence of ATMs, there's no reason to have a credit card, because there's hardly any place you can go anymore. You know why? The old rationale for having a credit card was the inavailability of cash in certain areas.
Right.
That doesn't hold water anymore.
Well, one of the things I want to say, because you just said something that is so important, which is you said, what did you say? I'm not good with money, or I'm not good with numbers. That's a story that people tell themselves. And what I mean by story is, it's a story. Because I'm promising you, it's not that difficult. You take this book, you look at page 98.
You may mention the name of it again.
Smart Women Finish Rich.
Hold it up to the microphone.
Yeah, Smart Women Finish Rich. You take this book and you turn to page 98 and we put your age in. Now, you told me...
All right, I'll be 52 next month.
Okay, so at 52...
Starting next month, I save $200 a month.
For 25 years.
For 25 years.
How much are you going to have at 12%?
Oh, $600.
You'll have about $400,000.
$400,000?
$400,000. Now, that's a lot better than zero.
David, I remember my mother told me after my dad died that if she hadn't been a bookkeeper before they got married, she would have been in a panic. And then you have, additionally, and this would be a whole show in itself, the number of women who never had a credit rating, who always lived in the shadow of their husband, and were a non-entity when the old man died.
Right. Well, I'll tell you a classic story. This happened in my first seminar, and this is what led to my book. In 1993, I did my first seminar, and I was telling all the reasons in the room why women need to be smart about money. And a woman stood up, and she said, David, I've got to say something. And she was 48 years old. Her name was Sarah. And she looked out at the room and she said, ladies, for 20 years I've been in charge of the kids. I have 3 children, and I've been in charge of raising the family. And my husband's been in charge of the finances. And he always would tell me, honey, don't worry about it. I'm taking care of everything. She said, well, unfortunately, my husband just died. He had a heart attack at age 51 at his desk, and he died. And she said, it's hard enough to lose your husband that you've loved for 20 years. She said, but now I'm having to learn everything about money. And she said, what I've learned is he didn't take care of it. He didn't have a will. He didn't have life insurance. He had no retirement plan, even though he told me that we had one. And we live in $1.5 million home right now with no money to pay the mortgage, and we're going to lose our home in 90 days. And I'm now working 2 full-time jobs after not working for 20 years to put food on the table for my kids. She said, I've gone from being a millionaire lifestyle to poverty-stricken in 90 days since my husband died. Now, that story is devastating. But I will tell you, having worked with so many women one-on-one, I have seen women robbed of their financial future from divorce, from widowhood, and from simply lack of planning. And so really that's why I wrote Smart Women Finish Rich, is to get the message out to women that, hey, you got to know about the money, you got to be serious about the money, it's easy to do, and it's safe, fast, and fun if you do it right.
One final thing. We're still a little ways from tax filing time. Would you again repeat those things that a person should be doing, even though we passed January 1, between now and April 15th to get on the bandwagon? Okay,
well, for God's sakes, you got to make sure that you've maximized your contributions to a pre-tax retirement account. Now, what do I mean? For instance, if you have a 401k retirement plan at work, make sure you're putting as much money in there as you can. If you haven't done any retirement planning this year, open up a deductible individual retirement account. The government will let you put $2,000 into that. Total tax write-off.
Is that what we call an IRA?
An IRA.
Okay.
Yeah, an IRA.
You put the word deductible there, kind of confused me, but a traditional IRA.
A traditional IRA. And go to the bank or a broker and open up one of these IRAs. It's something you can do if you haven't done anything.
And so particularly if a person is self-employed.
Oh, God, then do a SEP IRA.
Yeah.
That's an SEP IRA.
So there is something for everybody.
There's something for everybody. And, in my book, I go through all the different types of retirement accounts. And in Smart Women Finish Rich, like you said, men can read it too. And men, I'll tell you this, if you want to win major brownie points with your wife or your girlfriend, go out and buy this book and give it to her. I'm telling you, my experience has been that if you get women the book, Smart Women Finish Rich, you get a month worth of brownie points. And you can't do that very often for this small amount of money, so it's worth it.
David, I want to thank you for coming down to L.A. to talk to us. The book is called Smart Women Finish Rich. David Bach, spelled like the musician, is the author. And thanks again. Let's do this again sometime.
I'd love to.
Thanks
a lot. Fun. Thank you, Dennis.
Money guru David Bach and some thoughts about saving for your future. I'm Dennis Daly.